Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. And hey, while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and let's get into our story. There are moments in life that define us forever, choices that carve themselves into our souls like names on a tombstone. Marcus Bennett was about to make one of those choices, the kind that would haunt him in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. At 37, he'd built an investment empire that made grown men nervous, a portfolio worth hundreds of millions, and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to closing deals. His corner office on the 42nd floor overlooked the entire city, a kingdom of glass and steel that he ruled with an iron fist. Success wasn't just his drug, it was his identity, his religion, the only thing that made sense in a world he'd spent decades trying to control. Olivia Carter had been the exception to every rule Marcus had ever made for himself. She was chaos, where he demanded order, poetry, where he only understood spreadsheets, a woman who could make him laugh at 3 a.m. over burnt pancakes and terrible jokes. For 8 months, she'd been the only person who could get him to turn off his phone during dinner. The only reason he'd ever left the office before midnight, the only glimpse of something that felt dangerously close to happiness. She taught literature at a small liberal arts college, spent her weekends in second-hand bookstores, and believed that life was meant to be felt, not just calculated. Marcus used to tease her about living in fantasies while he dealt with reality. But secretly, he envied that ability to see magic in ordinary moments, to believe that second chances actually existed. That October evening, when Olivia walked into his penthouse with trembling hands and eyes brimming with unshed tears, Marcus knew immediately that everything was about to change. She held a small white box between her fingers, and when she opened it to reveal the pregnancy test with its 2 unmistakable pink lines, Marcus felt the floor disappear beneath him. But it wasn't joy that flooded through him, wasn't the excitement that Olivia had been praying to see on his face. It was pure, undiluted panic, the kind that turns men into cowards, that transforms love into something cold and unrecognizable. "Marcus, we're going to be parents," Olivia whispered, searching his face for any trace of the tenderness she'd once known. "It's twins, 2 little girls." Her voice cracked between hope and fear, because somewhere deep in her heart, she already knew his reaction wouldn't be what she'd dreamed about during the entire drive over. But Marcus didn't move to hold her. He didn't smile. He didn't ask how she was feeling, didn't place his hand on her stomach with the reverence of a man about to become a father. Instead, he took 3 measured steps backward, as if her words were a disease he needed to protect himself from. His jaw tightened, his eyes went cold as winter stone, and when he finally spoke, his voice was devoid of every emotion except calculation. "This can't be happening right now," he said, each word deliberate, controlled, stripped of anything resembling compassion. "I'm in the middle of the biggest merger of my career. I'm about to close a $500 million deal. I can't afford distractions." He spoke of his daughters like they were a quarterly earnings disappointment, an obstacle in his master plan, a variable he hadn't accounted for in his perfect equations of success. Olivia felt something shatter inside her, something that would never quite fit back together the same way. "Distractions," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Marcus, these are our daughters, 2 babies, 2 lives." But he'd already made his decision with the same cold efficiency he used to fire underperforming employees or walk away from bad investments. "You need to take care of this tomorrow," he ordered, pulling out his wallet and extending a platinum credit card toward her like it was a business transaction. "I know a private clinic, very discreet. Nobody has to know. It's the smartest move for both of us. Trust me on this." The words landed on Olivia like physical blows. She staggered back, staring at that extended credit card as if it were poison. "Take care of it? Is that what you're calling our daughters? Something to take care of?" Tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks as her voice rose. "Marcus, they're part of us." What followed was devastating. Olivia begged, argued, cried. She pleaded with him to look beyond his ambitions, to remember the man she'd fallen in love with, the man who had to still exist somewhere underneath that designer suit and that mask of steel. But Marcus remained unmoved, fortified behind his logic and his obsession with control. To him, fatherhood represented vulnerability, represented emotions he couldn't manage with profit margins, represented an unpredictable future that terrified him more than any market crash. "I'm not ready to be a father," he declared finally, turning his back to stare out those floor-to-ceiling windows at the city lights glittering below. "And you're not ready to be a mother. On your teacher's salary, how would you support 2 kids? Be realistic, Olivia. I'm offering you the best way out." Those words became the death sentence for everything between them. Olivia understood in that crushing moment that the man she'd loved had never truly existed, or perhaps had died somewhere along the way, suffocated under the weight of ambition and success. She let the credit card fall to the marble floor, where it landed with a small clink that sounded deafening in the silence. "I will never forgive you for this," Olivia said with a calm that was more terrifying than any scream. "And they'll grow up knowing their father rejected them before they were even born." She grabbed her purse with shaking hands and walked toward the door. Marcus didn't stop her. He stood at those windows, convinced he was making the rational choice, the strong choice. He poured himself a scotch, took a deep breath, and told himself she'd eventually understand, that she'd come back when the emotion wore off. But Olivia never came back. That night, Olivia packed her few belongings from the apartment they'd unofficially shared, took the ultrasound photo showing 2 tiny specks that were Emma and Lily, and vanished from Marcus's life like she'd never existed. She changed her number, deleted all her social media, quit her job at the university, and moved to another state. It wasn't a dramatic escape, but rather the quiet, determined withdrawal of someone who knew there was nothing left to fight for. The next 2 years became a silent war that Olivia waged against herself and the world. The pregnancy was complicated from day one. Doctors warned her about the risks of carrying twins, the potential complications, the need for rest that she couldn't afford because she had to work to eat. She found whatever job she could, waitressing at diners, doing administrative work, anything that would pay rent on a tiny apartment in a neighborhood where ambulance sirens were the nightly lullaby. There were nights Olivia woke in panic, hands on her growing belly, wondering if she could actually do this, if she was strong enough to raise 2 babies alone. There were days hunger was her constant companion because she saved every dollar for medical appointments. There were moments of despair so deep she'd sit on the floor of that rundown apartment and sob until she had no tears left, not for herself, but for the uncertain future awaiting her daughters. But Olivia also discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. Every kick she felt in her womb was a reminder of why the fight was worth it. Every ultrasound where she saw those 2 tiny hearts beating was fuel to keep going. And when labor finally came after 18 brutal hours in a county hospital where the walls were institutional green and the hallways smelled of antiseptic, when she heard those 2 cries announcing Emma and Lily's arrival into the world, Olivia knew she'd made the right choice. The twins were identical, with the same dark hair as Marcus, the same honey-colored eyes that would someday recognize a father who'd rejected them. Olivia held them against her exhausted chest and made a silent promise. They would never lack love, never feel abandoned, never doubt their worth. She would be mother and father, would be everything they needed. But raising infant twins alone was harder than anything Olivia had imagined in her worst nightmares. Nights became a blur of crying, diapers, bottles she prepared with trembling hands, while one baby screamed in each arm. She worked from home when possible, taking text editing jobs that paid pennies, but at least let her stay with her daughters. She learned to sleep in 20-minute fragments, to eat standing up, to cry silently in the bathroom so the girls wouldn't see her breakdown. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his life as if nothing had happened. He closed his multi-million-dollar merger, appeared on more magazine covers, bought a yacht, traveled the world sealing deals. There were moments in the quiet of pre-dawn when success felt curiously hollow. When he'd think about Olivia, he wondered if she'd taken care of the problem, if she was okay, if she'd ever forgive him. But he buried those thoughts under more work, more meetings, more corporate conquests. He never searched for her, never asked. In his mind, she was a closed chapter, an era better forgotten. What Marcus didn't know, couldn't even imagine, was that Olivia hadn't just survived. She'd transformed in ways that defied all logic. With the determination of a mother who had no choice but to succeed, Olivia resumed her studies. She took online classes during the twins' naps, wrote essays while breastfeeding, studied while the girls played at her feet. She completed a master's in business administration, then started a doctorate. Her brilliant mind, which Marcus had underestimated throughout their relationship, proved to be her greatest weapon. But what changed everything was an idea. One night, while reviewing monthly expenses and calculating how to stretch every dollar, Olivia had a revelation about inefficiencies in the corporate education sector. She wrote a business plan on paper napkins while the twins slept, refined it over months, and finally dared to pitch it to investors. Her proposal was revolutionary, an educational technology platform that combined artificial intelligence with humanistic pedagogy. Investors saw the potential immediately. In just 18 months, Olivia's startup had grown exponentially. EduTech Innovations became the most cutting-edge corporate training and consulting company in the market. Olivia, the same woman Marcus had believed incapable of surviving without him, now ran a company valued at $200 million. She was CEO, had been named Entrepreneur of the Year by 3 major business publications, and her face was starting to appear in the same magazines that once only featured Marcus. But none of that success mattered as much as her daughters. Emma and Lily grew beautiful, intelligent, full of that innocent joy only children can have. At 2 years old, they already showed distinct personalities. Emma was the adventurer, always running toward danger with crystalline laughter, while Lily was more thoughtful, observing the world with those honey eyes so similar to their father's. Olivia had given them everything: unconditional love, stability, and above all, the certainty that they were loved without conditions. But there was something Olivia had never told them, something she guarded like a wound that never quite healed: who their father was and why he'd never been present. The twins didn't ask yet, didn't notice that other families had daddies, and they didn't. But Olivia knew that day would come, and she had no idea how to explain that their father had rejected them before they even had names. What Olivia also didn't know was that fate has strange ways of closing circles we thought were open forever. Sarah Mitchell, her best friend from college, had maintained contact with both Olivia and Marcus, without either knowing about the other. Sarah had been there when Olivia left, had helped her through the darkest moments, had held the twins when Olivia thought she couldn't go on. But Sarah also knew Marcus from before. They'd worked together on a project years ago and maintained a cordial professional friendship. And when little Sophie, Sarah's daughter, was about to turn 3, she made a decision that would change everything. She decided to throw a big children's birthday party, one of those celebrations full of colors, bouncy houses, and magicians, in her suburban backyard. And on her guest list, without thinking too much about it, she included 2 names that hadn't seen each other in 2 years: Olivia Carter and Marcus Bennett. Neither knew the other would be there. Neither imagined that this sunny spring Saturday, amid the joyful chaos of a children's party, their worlds would collide again in the most unexpected way. And Marcus certainly couldn't imagine that the 2 little girls with honey eyes he was about to play with unknowingly would change his life forever. But what nobody imagined was how that encounter would unleash a series of events that would test the very concept of what it means to be a father, whether regret can erase abandonment, and whether a second chance is something you deserve or something you earn with blood, sweat, and tears. Saturday dawned with the kind of perfect blue sky that looks photoshopped, not a single cloud interrupting the endless expanse. Sarah Mitchell had transformed her backyard into a children's paradise. There were bouncy castles in electric colors, tables decorated with princess and superhero themes, balloons tied to every chair, and a massive inflatable slide that was already attracting the first arrivals. Little Sophie, in her puffy pink dress and plastic tiara, ran from one end to the other, thrilled that her big day had finally arrived. Sarah supervised every detail with military precision, completely unaware she was orchestrating the most explosive reunion of the year. Marcus arrived first. He pulled up in his latest Mercedes, dressed in expensive casual wear, designer jeans, crisp white shirt, and that Swiss watch on his wrist that cost more than most people's cars. He carried an enormous gift under his arm, wrapped in shimmering paper with an oversized bow. Sarah greeted him with a hug, never mentioning that Olivia was also invited, because honestly, she hadn't even thought about the potential drama. To her, they were friends from different chapters of her life, and enough time had passed. What could possibly go wrong? "You're early," Sarah said with a smile as she led him toward the backyard. "Kids are just starting to arrive. Sophie's going to be thrilled to see you. She always asks about her uncle Marcus." Marcus smiled, that practiced smile he used with important clients, polite but not exactly warm. Truth was, he wasn't a huge fan of children's parties, the noise, the chaos, the screaming. But Sarah had been a valuable ally in several business deals, and declining the invitation would have been rude. Besides, lately he'd been feeling strangely lonely, despite being surrounded by people constantly, and the idea of a normal afternoon without meetings or negotiations sounded almost appealing. He left the gift on the designated table and accepted the beer Sarah offered. Other guests began trickling in. Couples with kids of various ages, grandparents carrying more gifts, the typical joyful chaos of these celebrations. Marcus stood in a corner of the yard, watching with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort as children ran, screamed, fell, and got up laughing non-stop. There was something about that pure energy, that capacity to live in the moment without thinking about consequences, that felt completely foreign to him. That's when he saw them. Two identical little girls, like mirror images, had just entered the yard holding hands. They wore matching lavender dresses with white shoes that gleamed in the sun. They had dark hair pulled into high ponytails that bounced when they walked, and when one of them turned toward where Marcus stood, he felt something strange in his chest. Something he couldn't immediately identify. The eyes. Those girls had the exact same shade of honey-colored eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. But Marcus shook his head, dismissing the thought as ridiculous. Plenty of people had honey eyes. It was just coincidence. The twins ran toward the bouncy castle, their crystalline laughter mixing with the other children's. One of them, the bolder one, climbed fearlessly, while the other watched more cautiously from below, as if calculating whether it was safe before attempting it. Sarah approached Marcus with a smile. "Gorgeous, aren't they? They're a friend's daughters, twins, Emma and Lily. They're two, but already have more personality than most adults I know." She laughed and walked away to greet more guests, not noticing the strange expression that had briefly crossed Marcus's face. Something in him felt drawn to those girls. Maybe it was how they looked after each other, how the cautious one held the adventurous one's hand when she launched into some new feat. Or maybe it was simply that Marcus hadn't interacted with children in so long, and there was something refreshing about their total innocence. Without thinking too much, Marcus approached the bouncy castle. Emma, the adventurer, had just come down the inflatable slide, landing with a joyful shriek. When she saw him approaching, she looked at him with curiosity but no fear, that natural confidence children have who've grown up surrounded by love. "Hi," Marcus said, kneeling to her level, feeling strangely awkward. "Are you having fun?" Emma studied him with those enormous honey eyes, tilting her head like a curious bird. "Yeah. Watch how high I can jump." And without waiting for a response, she began bouncing inside the castle with seemingly inexhaustible energy, her ponytails flying with each leap. Lily approached then, shyer, partially hiding behind her sister, but unable to conceal her curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked with that brutal frankness only small children have. "I'm Marcus, a friend of Sarah's," he responded, surprised by how much he cared about winning these two little strangers' approval. "And you're Emma and Lily." "I'm Emma," the adventurer announced proudly, "and she's Lily. We call her that. We're twins." "I can see that. You're identical," Marcus observed, unable to help smiling at the evident pride in Emma's voice. There was something magnetic about these girls, something that made him want to stay there, in that simple world of bouncy castles and uncomplicated laughter. "You want to play with us?" Emma asked suddenly, with that direct invitation only children can make without ulterior motives. "Mommy says it's okay to play with grown-ups if they're Sarah's friends." And so, without knowing how or why, Marcus found himself taking off his shoes and entering the bouncy castle with two little girls he'd just met. He felt ridiculous, a 37-year-old CEO bouncing in an inflatable surrounded by kids, but he also felt strangely free. Emma challenged him to jump higher. Lily showed him how to do somersaults, though he politely declined that demonstration, and both laughed when he pretended to lose his balance and fell dramatically onto the bouncy floor. "You're funny," Emma declared, sitting next to him after half an hour of play. "Mommy says important grown-ups are very serious, but you're not that serious." Something in those words touched Marcus unexpectedly. When was the last time someone had called him funny? When was the last time he'd played without thinking about time, without checking his watch every 5 minutes, without worrying about the next meeting? Lily approached then and, with a confidence that surprised him, sat in his lap. "You have eyes like mine," she observed, staring at him with that disconcerting intensity small children have. "Mommy says our eyes are special because they're like honey." Marcus's heart did a strange flip. Yes, these girls' eyes were exactly like his, but again he told himself it was coincidence. Many people had honey-colored eyes. It didn't mean anything. "Your eyes are very pretty," he responded, feeling a strange knot in his throat. "And you're both very special, I can tell." Emma and Lily looked at each other and smiled with that silent complicity only twins have. Then Emma asked, "Do you have kids? Do you have girls like us?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. For a second, something crossed his mind. A memory he'd buried deep, Olivia standing in front of him, hands trembling, showing him a pregnancy test. "It's twins, 2 little girls." And he had said, he had demanded. "No," he finally answered, his voice sounding strange even to himself. "I don't have any children." "Well, you should," Lily said with complete seriousness, "because you play really well and you make us laugh. Daddies who play are the best daddies. That's what Aunt Sarah says." Marcus felt something crack inside him, something he hadn't known was there until these 2 little girls touched it with their innocent words. He was about to respond something, anything, when he heard a voice he hadn't heard in 2 years, but would recognize anywhere, under any circumstances, even amid the chaos of 100 children's voices screaming. "Emma, Lily, where are my—" Olivia had frozen mid-sentence. She stood at the edge of the yard, having arrived late because a last-minute meeting had run longer than planned. She wore an elegant but comfortable dress, navy blue, her hair perfectly styled, and that presence of a successful woman she'd cultivated over these 2 years. But all that disappeared when her eyes found Marcus, sitting in the bouncy castle with her 2 daughters in his lap. The world stopped. Marcus looked at her, and in that instant, in that fraction of a second that stretched like eternity, all the pieces clicked together with brutal, merciless clarity. The honey eyes, the dark hair, the girl's age, twins, 2 girls. It's twins, 2 little girls. Olivia's words from 2 years ago echoed in his mind with the force of an explosion, and suddenly Marcus understood. These weren't random girls he'd been playing with by chance. These were his daughters. Emma and Lily were his daughters. Olivia had gone ahead with the pregnancy. She'd had the twins. She'd raised them alone for 2 years. And he'd had no idea. Not because she'd deliberately hidden it after that first rejection, but because he'd never asked, never searched, never wanted to know. Marcus's face lost all color. He stood so abruptly that Lily almost lost her balance, and Emma looked at him confused. "What's wrong?" the girl asked, but Marcus could no longer hear. His mind was a whirlwind of understanding, horror, and something else he couldn't name. Olivia walked toward them with measured, controlled steps, though inside she felt like she was falling apart. Her face was a mask of composure, but her eyes, those blue eyes Marcus had once loved, burned with a mixture of contained fury, ancient pain, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. "Emma, Lily, come to Mommy," she said with a firm but trembling voice, extending her hands toward her daughters. The girls, confused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, obeyed immediately. They jumped out of the bouncy castle and ran to their mother, who embraced them with protective intensity, as if someone was about to snatch them away. Marcus exited the castle, his legs barely supporting him. "Olivia?" His voice was barely a broken whisper. They're your daughters?" Olivia completed with a cutting coldness that pierced him like a knife. "Yes, Marcus. Emma and Lily are your daughters, the same ones you ordered me to take care of, the same ones that to you were a problem, a distraction." Each word was a slap, pronounced with surgical precision designed to hurt. Emma looked up, confused. "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are you mad?" Olivia took a deep breath, recomposing her face into a forced smile. "Nothing's wrong, sweetie. Why don't you both go play in the sandbox with Sophie? Mommy needs to talk to this man for a minute." Lily hesitated, looking between her mother and Marcus with those eyes that reflected too much for their age. But finally, both girls left hand in hand toward the sandbox, turning every few steps to make sure their mother was still there. When they were far enough away, Olivia turned to Marcus with a look that could have melted steel. "What are you doing here?" Sarah invited me. I didn't know you'd..." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of desperation Olivia had never seen in him. "Olivia, I had no idea. I didn't know that I'd had our daughters, the ones you wanted me to eliminate like they were an accounting error." Olivia's voice trembled now, years of contained pain threatening to overflow. "Of course you didn't know, Marcus, because you never asked. You never cared enough to find out what happened to me, to us." Marcus felt his legs failing. He leaned against a nearby table, his mind unable to process the magnitude of what he'd just discovered. I assumed that I'd aborted like you ordered?" Olivia laughed, but it was a joyless laugh, full of bitterness. "Well, surprise, Marcus. Turns out some people don't follow orders when it comes to their children's lives. Turns out some people have a backbone." "Olivia, Marcus tried to approach, but she stepped back as if he were radioactive. "Don't you dare," Olivia hissed. "Don't you dare come near me. Not after 2 years. Not after abandoning me when I needed you most." Several guests had started noticing the tension. Sarah approached quickly, her face pale, as she realized the drama she'd unknowingly orchestrated. "Guys, what's happening? Are you okay?" But neither Olivia nor Marcus looked at her. They were locked in their own world of pending accounts, wounds that had never healed, words that had been waiting 2 years to be said. "I've been raising your daughters alone," Olivia continued, her voice breaking despite her efforts to maintain composure. "Alone in a public hospital when they were born, alone when Emma had pneumonia at 6 months, alone when Lily learned to walk, alone in every important moment of their lives because their father decided his empire was more important than his own flesh and blood." Marcus felt like he was drowning. "I didn't know." Olivia, if I'd known. What? Olivia challenged him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. What would you have done differently, Marcus? Would you have left your perfect life to get involved? Or would you have offered me money to keep me quiet? Because let me tell you something. I don't need your money. I don't need anything from you anymore. That's when Marcus really saw her, not the Olivia he'd known 2 years ago, the dreamy professor with modest income, but this new Olivia in a dress that easily cost what she used to make in a month, with the posture of someone accustomed to making important decisions, with the confidence of someone who'd conquered the world on her own. You've changed, Marcus murmured, as if seeing a ghost. I became a CEO, Olivia responded with a cold smile. EduTech Innovations. Maybe you've heard of us. We're your competition now in the corporate training sector. Ironic, isn't it? The woman you thought couldn't survive without you now runs a $200 million company. The blow was precise. Marcus felt like he'd been slapped. Everything he'd based his rejection on, his rational decision from 2 years ago, crumbled before his eyes. Olivia hadn't just survived. She'd triumphed in ways he never imagined possible. Olivia, Marcus searched for words that didn't exist. An apology big enough to cover 2 years of absence, 2 years of abandonment. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. If I could turn back time, Olivia completed. You can't. Nobody can. And you know what's the worst part, Marcus? It's not that you abandoned us. It's that I just watched you play with your daughters without knowing who they were, and in those 30 minutes you gave them more attention and affection than you were willing to give them in their entire existence. Those words impacted Marcus like a ton of bricks. It was true. He'd played with Emma and Lily, laughed with them, felt something warm and genuine being with those girls, and he had no idea they were his, which meant the problem had never been fatherhood itself. The problem had been fear, control, the perfect timing that never exists. I want to know them, Marcus said suddenly, the words coming out before he could think them through. I want to be part of their lives. Olivia, please give me a chance. I know I don't deserve it. I know that. You're right, Olivia interrupted with a voice of steel. You don't deserve it. And I'm not going to allow you to burst into my daughters' lives like a tornado just because your conscience finally woke up. They have stability, they have love, they have everything they need. They don't need you. But they're my daughters. Marcus's voice broke on the last word. Now they're your daughters, Olivia responded. 2 years ago, they were a problem to solve. You made your choice, Marcus. Now live with the consequences. She turned to leave, to collect her daughters and get out of there, away from this man who'd destroyed her world and now pretended to rebuild it with the same hands that had torn it down. But before walking away, she turned one last time, and the words she spoke were the most devastating of all. They ask about you, you know? Not about you specifically, but about their daddy. They ask where he is, why he's not with us. And I tell them their daddy had more important things to do. Because that's the truth, isn't it? You've always had more important things than your own daughters. And with that, Olivia walked toward the sandbox, took Emma and Lily by the hands, and left the party, leaving Marcus standing in the middle of the yard full of children's laughter, completely shattered, facing the most painful truth of his life. He'd played with his own daughters without recognizing them, rejected them without knowing them. And now that he finally understood what he'd lost, maybe it was already too late to get it back. Sarah approached him, pale and clearly distressed. Marcus, I didn't know. I never imagined that you two, that the girls. But Marcus couldn't hear her. He could only see through his eyes, blurred by tears he refused to shed, how Olivia walked away with Emma and Lily, his 2 daughters, 2 complete and beautiful lives that existed in the world without him, that didn't need him, that would probably be better off without him. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus Bennett, the man who always had a plan, who was always in control, who never failed, realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his existence, and he had no idea how to begin to make it right. But what Marcus still didn't know was that this was only the beginning, because Olivia wasn't going to make things easy. And Emma and Lily, those two little ones who'd stolen his heart without him knowing it, had their own magic, their own way of changing the world of the adults around them. And Marcus's battle for redemption was just beginning. The days following the party were personal hell for Marcus. He couldn't sleep, couldn't focus in meetings, could barely function. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emma and Lily, their crystalline laughter, their honey eyes identical to his, the way Lily had sat in his lap with such trust, how Emma had challenged him to jump higher. And then he saw Olivia's face, that face he'd once loved, transformed into a mask of justified pain and fury. His assistants noticed the change immediately. Marcus Bennett, the man who never wavered, who made decisions in seconds, who maintained composure even in the gravest crises, now stared into space during important presentations. He cancelled meetings without explanation. He locked himself in his office for hours without taking calls. His empire kept running because he had an exceptional team, but everyone knew something was terribly wrong with their leader. The truth was, Marcus was having an existential crisis of monumental proportions. For 2 years, he'd lived his life without knowing he had 2 daughters in the world. 2 years in which Emma and Lily had taken their first steps, said their first words, celebrated their first birthdays, all without him. And the worst part was knowing that absence hadn't been an accident of fate, but a deliberate choice he'd made. A sentence he himself had handed down. Olivia wasn't doing well either, though she hid it better. At the office, she remained the ruthless CEO, making strategic decisions, closing contracts, expanding her company. But at home, when Emma and Lily finally fell asleep, she sat in the darkened living room and let the tears flow. They weren't tears of weakness, but of contained rage, of old pain she'd thought overcome. But the reunion with Marcus had unearthed like a wound that had never truly healed. "Mommy, why don't we see the funny man anymore?" Emma asked one evening during dinner, with that brutal innocence of children who don't understand some questions hurt more than physical blows. Olivia almost dropped her fork. "What man, sweetheart?" "From Sophie's party," Lily explained, pushing her vegetables around her plate. "The one who played with us in the bouncy castle. He had eyes like ours. He said we were special." Olivia's heart contracted painfully. Of course the girls remembered him. Of course Marcus, in 30 minutes of unconscious play, had left an impression on them. That was precisely the cruelest irony. When he didn't know they were his daughters, he'd been capable of giving them the attention and affection he'd denied when he did know. "That man, he's just a friend of Aunt Sarah's," Olivia responded, carefully choosing her words. "We probably won't see him again." Emma frowned, clearly unsatisfied with the answer. "But he said we were very special, and I liked how he played. Not like other grown-ups who just look at their phones." Olivia felt something break inside her. How could she explain that the funny man was their father? How could she tell them he'd rejected them before they were born? How could she destroy her daughter's innocence with such a brutal truth? "There are many special people in the world, sweetheart," she finally said, stroking Emma's hair, "and you're going to meet a lot of them. But always remember that the most special person in your lives is the one who's here every day, who takes care of you when you're sick, who reads you stories before bed. That's the person who really matters." But as she said those words, Olivia wondered if she was being fair, not to Marcus, to whom she owed nothing, but to her daughters. Did they have the right to know their father? Did they have the right to decide for themselves if they wanted him in their lives? Or was it her duty as a mother to protect them from the man who'd rejected them? Meanwhile, Marcus had made a decision. He couldn't continue like this, paralyzed by guilt and regret. He needed to do something, though he didn't know exactly what. He hired a private investigator, not to spy, but to understand. He needed to know what Olivia's life had been like these 2 years, how she'd managed not just to survive, but to prosper so spectacularly. The report arrived a week later, and each page was like receiving a stab wound. The investigator had been thorough, maybe too thorough. Marcus read about Olivia's complicated pregnancy, the medical risks she'd faced alone. He read about the multiple nights in the hospital when the twins were born premature, spending weeks in incubators while Olivia worked during the day and slept in a hospital chair at night. He read about the 3 simultaneous jobs Olivia had worked that first year, sleeping 4 hours a day, surviving on coffee and pure determination. But he also read about the miracle, about how Olivia had used those few hours of sleep to study, to prepare a business plan, to dream of something bigger, about how she'd pitched her idea to 12 investors and 11 rejected her, but the 12th saw the potential, about how she'd built edutech innovations from scratch, working from her tiny apartment while the twins crawled at her feet, transforming her pain into fuel, her desperation into determination. The report included photographs. Olivia taking the twins to the park, all 3 faces lit by sun. Olivia at a press conference, announcing a new funding round, with that expression of contained triumph. Emma and Lily on their first day of daycare, with backpacks bigger than them, smiling at the camera. A complete, functional, happy family. Without him. Marcus cried that night. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child, with sobs that tore at his chest, with grief so deep his bones ached. He wasn't crying for self-pity, but for the crushing understanding of everything he'd lost, everything he'd destroyed with his cowardice disguised as rationality. But tears weren't enough. Regret didn't change the past. Marcus knew he needed to act, but he also knew he couldn't simply burst into their lives demanding a place he hadn't earned. He needed a plan, but this time it wasn't a business plan. It was a plan to recover something far more valuable than any company, the opportunity to know his daughters. He started small. He asked Sarah, who'd been devastated realizing the drama she'd caused unwittingly, to give him information about Olivia and the girls' routines. Not to stalk them, but to understand their world. He learned she took them to the park every Saturday morning, that Lily loved the swings while Emma preferred the slide, that Olivia read them stories on the bench while they ate ice cream. One Saturday, Marcus went to the park. He kept his distance, watching from behind some trees like a pathetic stalker, and he hated himself for it. But he couldn't stay away. Watching his daughters play, watching Olivia push them on the swings with a smile he'd never managed to provoke, was both torture and necessity. Emma saw him first. Her eyes lit with recognition, and before Marcus could react, the girl ran toward him shouting, "It's the funny man! Mommy, look, it's the man from the party!" Olivia turned, and when her eyes found Marcus, all the blood seemed to drain from her face. She jumped up, took Lily's hand, and walked quickly toward where Emma had run, with an expression mixing panic and fury. "Emma, come here now," she ordered with a firm but trembling voice. But Emma, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding, took Marcus's hand with childlike trust. "Mommy, look, it's my friend. Can you play with us again?" Marcus knelt, his heart breaking, seeing the innocence in his daughter's eyes. "Hi, Emma. Hi, Lily." His voice was barely a whisper. Olivia arrived and practically yanked Emma from his side. "Marcus, this is stalking. I'm going to sue you if you don't stop." "Please," Marcus interrupted, and there was so much pain in his voice that Olivia stopped. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes. I'm begging you." "Mommy, why are you mad?" Lily asked, confused by the tension she didn't understand. "The man is nice. He played with us." Olivia looked at her daughters, then at Marcus, and something in her gave slightly. It wasn't forgiveness, not even compassion. It was simply exhaustion. Exhaustion from carrying everything alone, from being the only barrier between her daughters and the man who'd rejected them, from making all the hard decisions without help. "Girls, go play in the sandbox. I can see you from here," she finally said. Mommy needs to talk to this man for a moment. Emma and Lily obeyed, though they kept turning every few seconds to make sure their mother hadn't disappeared. When they were far enough away, Olivia turned to Marcus with a look that could cut diamonds. "You have 3 minutes. Talk." Marcus took a deep breath, searching for words he knew would never be enough. "I've been investigating. I know everything you went through. The complicated pregnancy, the premature births, the 3 jobs, everything. Olivia, You spied on me." Olivia's voice was dangerously low. "You hired someone to investigate me. I needed to understand." Marcus defended himself weakly. "I needed to know how it was, how you managed." "Well, here's your answer." Olivia spread her arms, gesturing toward where Emma and Lily played. "I managed because I had no other choice. I managed because they deserved a better life than the poverty they were born into. I managed because, unlike you, I don't run when things get tough." Each word was a poisoned arrow, and Marcus received them all without defending himself because he knew he deserved them. "You're right. About everything. I was a coward. I was cruel. I was unforgivable. But Olivia, please, give me a chance to know them. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking us to be anything. I'm just asking you to let me be their father." "Their father?" Olivia laughed, but there was no humor in that sound. "Marcus, fathers are there from the beginning. Fathers wake up at 3 a.m. when their kids cry. Fathers change diapers and warm bottles and worry when there's fever. You're not their father. You're a sperm donor who coincidentally showed up 2 years later." The words hurt more than Marcus expected, but he forced himself to stand firm. "Then let me earn that title. Let me prove I can be more than that. Please." Olivia studied him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. When she finally spoke, her voice was tired, almost defeated. "You know what hurts me most, Marcus? It's not that you abandoned us. It's not even that you forced me to choose between you and them. It's that you just spent probably 15 minutes watching us like a stalker, and in that time you saw more of their lives than you wanted to see in 2 complete years. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but he had no defense. It was true. Everything was true. "They deserve better than this," Olivia continued, looking toward where her daughters built sand castles. "They deserve better than a father who shows up out of guilt and disappears when the feeling passes. They deserve stability, consistency, unconditional love, and I'm not going to risk their happiness on your empty promises." "They're not empty," Marcus insisted, taking a step toward her. "Olivia, I'd give up everything, my company, my money, everything, just for the chance to know them, to be part of their lives." Olivia looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been pity. "There's your problem, Marcus. You still think in terms of sacrifices, renunciations, big dramatic gestures. But fatherhood isn't about that. It's about the small daily moments, about being there when they need you, not when you decide it's convenient." "Then teach me," Marcus pleaded, and for the first time in his adult life, he didn't care about sounding desperate. "Teach me how to be the father they deserve. I know I don't know how. I know I'll mess it up 1,000 times, but I want to try. Please, give me that chance." Olivia closed her eyes, as if fighting an internal battle. When she opened them again, there was something different in them. It wasn't forgiveness, but perhaps it was the beginning of something like consideration. "If I do this," she said slowly, "there are rules, non-negotiable. First, you go slow. You don't tell them who you are until I decide they're ready. Second, if at any point you decide it's too much, that it interferes with your precious career, you leave and never come back. No more dramatic entrances and exits. Third, the first mistake, the first time you hurt them, the first time you don't show up when you promise, it's over. No second chances with my daughters' hearts." Marcus nodded frantically, feeling for the first time in weeks that there was light at the end of the tunnel. "I accept everything, any condition." "And fourth," Olivia took a step toward him, her gaze piercing him, "never, ever investigate me or follow us again. If you want to know something about our lives, you ask me directly. Understood? Understood, Marcus whispered. Olivia watched him for another moment, as if searching for some sign he would fail, some crack in his determination. When she found none, she sighed deeply. Next Saturday, 10 a.m., same park, 1 hour, that's all I'm giving you for now. Marcus felt his chest expand with something he hadn't felt in weeks, hope. Thank you. Olivia, thank you. I won't let you down, I swear. You already let me down once, Olivia responded coldly. The difference now is you wouldn't just disappoint me. You'd disappoint them. And that, Marcus, that would be truly unforgivable. With that, Olivia turned and walked toward where Emma and Lily continued playing. Girls, it's time to go. Already? Emma protested. But we just started our castle. We'll finish it next time, Olivia promised, throwing one last significant look at Marcus. Next time. As he watched them walk away, Emma turned and waved goodbye. Bye, funny man. Play with us next time. Marcus raised his hand in response, with a lump in his throat so big he could barely breathe. Next time, he whispered to himself, like a promise, like a prayer, because now he knew something with absolute certainty. He'd found something more important than all his deals, more valuable than all his fortune, more essential than any success he'd achieved. He'd found a reason to be a better man, to transform into someone worthy of the love of those two girls who didn't even know they were his. The most important battle of his life had just begun. And this time, success wouldn't be measured in money or power, but in hugs, in shared laughter, in the right to be called Daddy. And Marcus was willing to fight for that with everything he had, because he'd finally understood that some things can't be bought, negotiated or forced. They can only be earned, day by day, moment by moment, with patience, humility, and a love he was just beginning to understand. The following Saturday dawned with a light fog covering the city like a veil. Marcus hadn't slept all night. He'd tried on 5 different outfits, each one discarded for looking too formal or too casual or too showy. He finally settled on simple jeans and a light blue shirt, nothing that screamed millionaire or CEO. Today he wasn't Marcus Bennett, the mogul. Today he just wanted to be a man trying to know his daughters. He arrived at the park 15 minutes early, palms sweating and heart pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears. He sat on a bench, watching other parents play with their children, wondering if he could ever be like them, natural and comfortable in a role that for him was completely unknown territory. At exactly 10 o'clock, Olivia appeared with Emma and Lily. The twins ran ahead, their ponytails bouncing, while Olivia walked behind with that guarded posture that now defined every interaction between them. When Emma saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made Marcus's heart melt. "The funny man came!" Emma shouted, running toward him. Lily followed more slowly, with that characteristic caution Marcus was already learning to recognize as part of her personality. Marcus knelt to their level. "Hi, Emma. Hi, Lily. I'm so happy to see you both. Are you gonna play with us?" Emma asked with that direct frankness of children. "Mommy said only 1 hour, so we have to make it count." Olivia approached, her arms crossed over her chest. 1 hour, she repeated firmly, looking at Marcus, "and I'm staying right here watching." Of course, Marcus accepted immediately. He expected nothing less, and frankly, he didn't deserve less. What followed was simultaneously the most wonderful and most painful hour of Marcus's life. He played with Emma and Lily on the swings, on the slide, in the sandbox. He listened to their disconnected stories about their daycare, about their imaginary cat named Fluffy, about how Lily could count to 20, but Emma could hop on 1 foot longer. Each detail was a treasure Marcus guarded jealously. Memories he was building to fill the void of 2 lost years. There were moments that broke him, like when Lily fell and automatically ran to Olivia, not to him, to be consoled. Or when Emma casually mentioned when we were babies, and Marcus had to fight against the wave of pain, knowing he never saw those moments. never held his daughters as infants, never rocked them to sleep. Olivia watched from the bench, her expression carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders, how her hands clenched every time the girls got too close to him. It wasn't just caution, it was fear. Fear that he'd hurt them, fear that he'd disappear again, fear that his temporary presence would cause more harm than good. With 10 minutes left in the hour, Lily sat next to Marcus in the sandbox, studying him with those honey eyes so similar to his that it hurt to look at them. "Do you have a mommy too?" she asked with childlike curiosity. The question caught Marcus off guard. "Yes, I have a mom, though she's very old now. She's a grandma." "Whose grandma is she?" Lily tilted her head, confused. Marcus felt the ground open beneath him. He couldn't say yours, not yet, not when Olivia had made it clear they shouldn't know yet. "Of other children," he lied, and the lie tasted like ashes in his mouth. Emma approached then, with sand in her hands. "Do you have kids? Girls like us?" And there was the question Marcus had been dreading. He looked toward Olivia, seeking guidance, but she simply watched him with an expression that clearly said, "This is your problem. Solve it." Marcus swallowed. "I don't have children living with me, but I'd like to. I'd really like to have girls like you." "Well, you should ask someone," Emma suggested, with the brutal simplicity of a 2-year-old. "Mommy says if you want something beautiful, you have to ask with your heart." Marcus felt tears threatening to surface. "Your mommy is very wise. Why are you sad?" Lily asked suddenly, placing her small hand on Marcus's arm. "Your eyes are shiny like when mommy cries at night." The observation hit both Marcus and Olivia simultaneously. Olivia tensed visibly, not knowing her daughters had noticed her moments of nighttime pain. Marcus had to fight the impulse to stand up, walk to Olivia and embrace her, to apologize for every tear she'd shed because of him. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad," Marcus explained gently, "because they think about things they lost. But being with you makes me happy, very happy." "Then don't think about the lost things," Emma advised with the accidental wisdom of children. "Think about the things you have now, like us. Now you have us to play with." But that was precisely the problem. Marcus didn't have them, not really. They were like sand slipping through his fingers, a borrowed hour from a complete life he'd lost through his own stupidity. "Time's up," Olivia announced, standing. Her voice was firm, but there was something else there, a tension that hadn't been before. "Girls, say goodbye to Mr. Marcus." "Already?" they protested in unison. "But we were just playing." 1 hour was the deal. Olivia was inflexible. "Say goodbye." Emma hugged Marcus spontaneously, with that innocent confidence only children have. "Are you coming next week?" Marcus looked at Olivia over Emma's head, a silent question in his eyes. Olivia hesitated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes," Marcus promised, hugging Emma carefully, as if she were made of glass. "Next week." Lily, shyer, offered her hand for a high five. "Bye, Mr. Marcus. You were fun again." "You were more fun," Marcus responded, his voice breaking slightly. As Olivia led the girls back toward her car, Marcus stood in the park, watching them walk away. But this time, Olivia turned. Just for a second, their eyes met across the distance, and in that look there was something complex, something that wasn't forgiveness, but perhaps was understanding. The following Saturdays followed the same pattern. 1 hour in the park, Olivia watching like a hawk, Emma and Lily gradually warming to Marcus. He learned that Lily liked being read stories, while Emma preferred action. He learned they both hated broccoli, but loved strawberries. He learned they shared a secret twin language, looks and smiles nobody else could decipher. But he also learned how difficult it was to love someone you couldn't claim as yours. Every time the girls called him Mr. Marcus instead of Daddy, it was like receiving a stab wound. Every time they ran to Olivia instead of him when scared or hurt, it was a reminder of his absence in the moments that really mattered. One rainy afternoon, after 6 weeks of park meetings, Olivia did something unexpected. She called Marcus. "The girls are sick," she said without preamble. "Flu. Nothing serious, but they're miserable. Lily asked for you." Marcus's heart flipped. "She asked for me?" "Don't get excited," Olivia warned, but her voice didn't have its usual edge. She sounded tired, human. "She just said she wanted the funny man to read her a story. Apparently, I do the character voices wrong." "I can come," Marcus offered immediately. "Or I can send—" "Don't send anything," Olivia interrupted. "If you come yourself. Not your money, not your expensive gifts, just you." Marcus was in his car in 5 minutes. He drove through the rain to Olivia's apartment, a place he'd never been, a home she'd built without him. When he arrived, Olivia opened the door with a cautious expression. 30 minutes, she established, and you follow house rules. Don't promise them anything you can't deliver. Don't give them false hope. The apartment was small but cozy, full of drawings on the walls, toys organized in colorful boxes, photos of Emma and Lily at every stage of their short lives. Marcus stopped in front of a photo of them as babies, identical even then, and felt his chest compress painfully. "They were so small," he whispered. "They were," Olivia responded from behind, her voice soft but firm. "And they were very sick, born premature. Remember the report you had made? They spent 5 weeks in the hospital. I slept in a chair between their incubators, alone." Each word was a justified accusation, a reminder of everything he'd missed by his own choice. "Olivia, No," she raised a hand. "Not now. The girls are waiting. Room at the end of the hall." Marcus walked toward the bedroom as if walking toward his judgment. When he opened the door, he found Emma and Lily curled together in a small bed, cheeks flushed with fever, little noses red, but smiling when they saw him. "You came," Lily exclaimed with a hoarse voice. "Of course I came." Marcus sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I heard you needed the world's best storyteller." "Mommy says she's the best," Emma objected, but she was smiling. "Well, I'm the second best then," Marcus conceded, taking the book Lily extended to him. What followed was magical in its simplicity. Marcus read stories with silly voices, made the girls laugh until they coughed, brought them water when Olivia asked, adjusted their blankets, sang them nursery rhymes he didn't know he knew. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a stranger. He felt like what he was, a father caring for his sick daughters. Olivia watched from the doorway, and Marcus could feel her gaze. When the girls finally fell asleep, Lily holding Marcus's hand and Emma with her head on her sister's shoulder, Olivia spoke quietly. "We need to talk." They moved to the living room, and for the first time, Olivia didn't seem to be in battle mode. She looked tired, vulnerable, human. "They love you," Olivia said bluntly. "I can see it. And you're really trying." "I am," Marcus confirmed. "Olivia, every minute with them is a gift I know I don't deserve, but I treasure it, every second." Olivia sat down, running her hands over her face. "I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to keep protecting them from you, from the possibility you'll hurt them. But the other part sees how they look at you, how Emma searches for you now at the park, how Lily saves drawings to show you." "I'll never hurt them," Marcus swore. "I'd rather die first." "You can't promise that." Olivia looked at him with tired eyes. "Everyone hurts the people they love. The question is whether you'll stay when it's hard, when it's not fun anymore, when it requires real sacrifices." "I'll stay." Marcus leaned forward. "Olivia, I've cancelled multi-million-dollar meetings to be with them. I've turned down business trips. My board thinks I'm having a crisis, and maybe I am. But for the first time in my life, my priorities are in order." Olivia studied him for a long moment. "There's something you need to understand. If you do this, if you really become part of their lives, it's not something you can walk away from when it suits you. This is forever. Even if you and I never speak civilly again, even if you hate me the rest of your life, they have to be your priority. Can you live with that?" "I can," Marcus responded without hesitation. "I want to live with that." Olivia took a deep breath, as if about to jump off a cliff. Then I think it's time to tell them the truth, who you really are. Marcus's heart stopped. Are you sure? No, Olivia admitted, and for the first time she smiled slightly. But they deserve to know. They deserve to have the option of knowing their father, if they're ready for that. And you? Marcus asked softly. Are you ready? Olivia took time to answer. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know if I'll ever completely forgive you for what you did. The pain of that rejection, of carrying everything alone, that doesn't disappear. But I see how you are with them. I see you've really changed, and maybe that's enough to begin. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something more valuable. It was a real opportunity, earned with patience and consistency, to be the father Marcus had refused to be 2 years ago. Thank you, Marcus whispered, and there was so much weight in that word that Olivia had to look away. Don't thank me yet, she said, standing. Being a father is the hardest job in the world, and you just enrolled in a crash course. Marcus stood too. I'm ready, for whatever comes. Olivia guided him to the door, but before opening it, she stopped. Marcus, one more thing. If you ever make them feel like you made me feel, like they're a burden or a mistake, I swear there won't be a power in this world that'll let you see them again. Understood, Marcus responded, and he meant it. As he drove back to his penthouse that night, under the rain that was finally calming, Marcus reflected on the impossible journey he'd traveled. From being the man who'd rejected his own daughters out of fear and ambition, to being the man who would now give anything to hear their laughter one more time. It wasn't redemption, not yet. Redemption isn't earned in weeks or months. It's earned in years of constant presence, in thousands of small moments of love and care, in being there not just when it's convenient, but when it's necessary, especially when it's difficult. But it was a beginning. And for a man who'd been certain he'd lost everything that mattered, a beginning was more than he dared hope for. The next day, Olivia called Marcus. Come this afternoon. We're going to talk to them. And so, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, sitting on the small sofa in the apartment with Emma and Lily between them, Olivia took her daughter's hands and said the words that would change everything. Girls, Mr. Marcus isn't just our friend. He's your daddy. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma and Lily looked at Marcus with those enormous honey eyes, processing information too big for their small minds. Emma spoke first, with that devastating frankness of children. Then why didn't you live with us before? And Marcus, looking at those two small people who were his yet weren't, who'd forgiven him without knowing there was something to forgive, had to find words to explain the inexplicable, to justify the unjustifiable, to begin the long road of earning the title he'd just received, not by right, but by grace. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life, he responded with brutal honesty, and I've spent every day since trying to fix it. Lily approached him then, placed her small hand on his cheek, and asked with the innocence only a child can have, "Did you fix it yet?" Marcus looked at Olivia, who returned a look that was complex, full of old pain but also cautious hope. Then he looked at his daughters, these two perfect little people who existed against all odds, despite him, not because of him. I'm still trying, he admitted, but with your help, maybe someday I will. Dear team. And Emma, with the accidental wisdom of 2 years, said something that would resonate in Marcus for the rest of his life. Mommy says, what matters isn't falling down, it's getting up. You fell down, but you got up. So now you can be our daddy for real. In that moment, sitting on that modest sofa in an apartment he'd never visited, surrounded by a family he'd rejected, and that was miraculously giving him a second chance, Marcus Bennett understood something fundamental. True success isn't measured in money or power, but in the people willing to love you despite your biggest mistakes. And a man's true worth isn't in what he builds, but in what he's willing to rebuild, brick by brick, with patience and love, when he's destroyed what was most precious. It wasn't a perfect happy ending. There was too much pain, too many scars, too many lost years for that, but it was something better. It was a new beginning earned with blood, sweat, and tears, built on the fragile but real foundation of genuine regret and love, discovered too late, but not too late to matter. And as Emma and Lily snuggled against him, one on each side, calling him Daddy for the first time, Marcus knew he'd spend the rest of his life making sure he was worthy of that title. Because the price of regret isn't paid once, but every day, in every decision to choose love over ambition, presence over power, family over fortune. And for the first time in his life, Marcus was ready to pay that price. So there you have it. What did you think of this story? Would you have forgiven Marcus if you were in Olivia's shoes? Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from and what you think about second chances when it comes to family. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that make you reflect, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to make things right, but that we also can't expect forgiveness to come easy. Because true love, the kind that's worth it, is always earned, never demanded. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.